Tonight, we're going to follow the oldest story there is. The story the old books in Canalave City only tell in fragments, in verses worn smooth by retelling. How time began, how space was carved out of the formless, how the world was given mind and feeling and the will to move, and we'll follow it the way a myth is meant to be followed, slowly, with no hurry to arrive, letting the strangeness settle over you like a blanket. If these quiet journeys through the old lore are the kind of thing you'd like to drift off to again, take a moment before you settle in to subscribe, so the next one finds you when the night comes round. That's all I'll ask. Now get comfortable. Let your eyes close if they want to. You don't have to remember any of this. You only have to drift. This is the story of how everything came to be. Let's begin where the myths themselves begin. Though, as you'll see, even the beginning is something the old stories can't quite agree on. There is a being the legends call the original one. In the libraries of Sinnoh, in the verses the scholars have copied and recopied for longer than anyone can count, it is said that this being came before the world. Not first among many, first when there were no others. It existed in the nothing we just spoke of, in the time before time, and according to the oldest telling, it shaped everything that came afterward. Every star, every grain of sand, every breath drawn by every living thing that would ever live. All of it, the myth says, traces back to this single being, alone in the void. Its name in the modern tongue is Arceus, but hold that name loosely for a moment. Because one of the most beautiful things about this story, and one of the things that makes it perfect for a night like tonight, is how carefully the old stories avoid saying too much. The myth does not describe Arceus the way a wiki describes a creature, with measurements and a list of abilities. The myth gestures. It says there was a being. It says it shaped the world, and then it lets the silence do the rest. Here's the image the legend leaves us with, and it's worth sitting inside it for a while. In the beginning, the story says there was a single egg, one egg drifting in the swirling chaos before there was a world to drift through. And from that egg, the original one came into being. Some tellings say it shaped the universe with 1,000 arms, 1,000, reaching out into the formless dark and giving it edges, giving it order, giving it the very possibility of being something rather than nothing. 1,000 arms working in a place where there was not yet any such thing as a place. Try to picture that, gently, without straining. It isn't meant to be pictured clearly. It's meant to be felt at the edge of understanding, the way you feel the shape of a dream just after you wake, before it slips away. Now, here's where it gets stranger. The myth never quite explains where the egg came from. It tells us the original one emerged from it, but it does not tell us who laid it, or what it floated in, or how long it waited there before it stirred. And this isn't a gap the story is embarrassed about. It isn't a missing page. The old books seem to understand something that the rest of us only learn slowly over a lifetime. That the very first question, why is there anything at all, instead of nothing, is a question that has no flaw. You can always ask what came before, and before that, and before that. The myth simply stops at the egg and says, here, this is as far back as the story goes. Beyond this, only wonder. So let's stay with what the myth does tell us. It tells us the original one was alone. And this is the first quiet ache of the whole story. If you let yourself feel it, imagine being the only thing that is. No sky above you because you are older than the sky. No ground beneath you because the ground has not been imagined yet. No other eyes anywhere because eyes do not exist. Because seeing does not exist. Because there is nothing to see. Just you and the endless formless nothing, stretching out in every direction that isn't yet a direction. What does a being do alone like that? According to the myth, it creates, not out of need exactly. The old stories don't give the original one hungers or fears the way they give them to lesser legends. It creates the way water flows downhill, the way warmth spreads from a fire, as a kind of overflowing, as if existence, once it began, could not help but make more existence. And so the first act of creation was not the making of a star or a sea or a single living creature. The first act, the myth says, was the making of the rules themselves, the deep machinery underneath everything. The the being shaped the conditions that would allow a world to exist at all. And to do that, it needed three things to come into being first. Three forces born from the original one that would become the pillars holding up all of reality. It needed time so that one moment could follow another. It needed space so that things could be apart from other things. And it needed, though this third one the myths only whisper about, the place between the shadow side of creation, the anti-world where the rules run backward. So from itself, alone in the nothing, the original one brought forth three. We'll meet each of them in turn. But before we go on, let's pause for breath, because the story is about to grow a great deal larger, and there's no hurry. So far, this is all we have. A being that came before the world, emerging from an egg no one can explain, alone in a nothing that did not yet have a name, and the first stirring of an intention to make out of all that emptiness a place where things could be. That's where we are. The world has not begun yet, but it is about to. The first two beings the original one brought forth were twins of a kind, not in the way brothers are twins, but in the way a coin has two faces that can never meet and never part. One was given dominion over time, the other was given dominion over space, and between the two of them, they made it possible for a world to exist at all. Let's start with time, because in a way, time had to come first, even though first is itself a word that only means anything once time exists. The keeper of time is called Dialga. Picture, if you can, a vast being the color of deep water and polished steel, with something at the center of its chest that looks like a gem but is not a gem, a core that seems to hold a faint, slow pulse, like the ticking of a clock too enormous to hear. The myths say that when Dialga came into being, time itself began to flow. Before Dialga, there was no before, there was no sequence, no one thing then another, no past gathering behind and no future opening ahead. Everything that could happen and everything that had happened and everything that would happen all sat together in a single frozen instant that wasn't even an instant, because an instant needs time to measure it. And then Dialga drew its first breath, and the great river of time began to move. Think about what that means slowly. Every sunrise that has ever colored a sky, every season turning into the next, every heartbeat in every chest, every word spoken and then fading, every memory laid down and softened by the years, all of it rides on the current that began when Dialga began. The myth tells us that as long as Dialga's heart beats, time flows on, and it leaves us, very gently, with the thought underneath that if that heart were ever to stop, time itself might stop with it. Everything caught mid-motion, the falling leaf frozen above the ground, the wave frozen as it curls. Forever, which is a word that would no longer mean anything, because forever is made of time too. But Dialga's heart does not stop. So the river flows, and we float along on it, all of us, even now, even tonight, carried gently forward second by second toward a morning we don't have to think about yet. Now, here's where it gets stranger. The myths tell us that Dialga does not simply live inside time the way we do. Dialga can move through it. There are old stories, half remembered, of the timekeeper appearing in moments far from its own, of the river bending back on itself, of past and future folding together like a sheet drawn from both ends. The old books don't dwell on this. They mention it the way you might mention in passing that the oldest tree in the forest has seen things you never will, and then move on, leaving the weight of it to settle behind you. So that is time, one being, and one slow heartbeat, and the whole flowing river of everything that happens. Now let's turn to its twin. The keeper of space is called Palkia. If Dialga is the color of deep water and steel, Palkia is the color of pearl, pale and rose and shifting, with two great spheres set into its shoulders that the myths say hold the very fabric of space. And where Dialga gave us before and after, Palkia gave us here and there. This is harder to feel than time, so let's take it slowly, because we have all night. Before Palkia, there was no distance. Think about how strange that is. With no space, there is no near and no far. There is no over there. There is no room for one thing to sit beside another thing because there is no beside. Everything that existed, and remember, almost nothing existed yet, would have had to occupy the same nowhere, with no gap between, no room to spread out, no possibility of a sky stretching away from the ground because there could be no stretching at all. And then Palkia came into being, and space unfolded. Suddenly there was room. Room for a star to be light years from another star. Room for a mountain to stand apart from the sea. Room, eventually, for you to lie where you are lying now, in your own particular spot in all the vastness. A spot that is yours and no one else's, separated by gentle distances from everyone and everything else. All of that, the simple, enormous fact that things can be apart, that is Palkia's gift. The myth says Palkia can stretch space and fold it, can pull two distant places together or push two near things impossibly far apart. Space, in Palkia's keeping, is not the rigid empty box we sometimes imagine. It is more like cloth. It can be gathered, it can be smoothed, and here is the thing about Dialga and Palkia that the old stories return to again and again. The thing that makes them twins rather than merely two. Time without space would be meaningless. A sequence of moments with no room for anything to happen in them, and space without time would be just as empty. A vast, still room where nothing ever moves, because movement requires one moment to follow another. Neither force is enough on its own. It is only the two together, before and after, here and there, time and space woven through each other, that make a universe that anything can actually live in. They are two halves of a single thing, the frame that everything else hangs upon. Now here's the part the old stories disagree on, and it's worth lingering over. Some tellings say that Dialga and Palkia were peaceful in their work, that they took up their twin labours of time and space and have carried them faithfully ever since, like two hands of the same body, never quarrelling. But other tellings whisper that the two have clashed, that a being who commands all of time and a being who commands all of space might not always agree on how the world should be shaped. There are myths, and they are only myths. The games are careful never to confirm them as history, of the two great forces in conflict, and of the terrible danger such a conflict would mean. Because if the Keeper of Time and the Keeper of Space were ever truly to fight, what would tear? Not flesh, the fabric of reality itself. The river of time and the cloth of space, both pulling against each other, until the world threatened to come apart at the seams. But the myth does not let us linger in that fear, and neither will we, because that is not the register of tonight's story. The old books always pull back from the edge. Whatever tension lies between time and space, the world still stands. The river still flows, the distances still hold. Whatever the twins are to each other, rivals, partners, two faces of one coin, the universe they made together remains, and we are living in it, and it is for now at peace. So let's take stock, the way we promised we would, because the story is building and it helps to know where we stand. So far, the world has been given two of its three deepest pillars. From the original one, alone in the nothing, came time, and the great river began to flow, and came space, and the world unfolded with room to hold everything that would ever be, before and after, here and there. The frame is taking shape, but a frame has more than two sides, and the third, being the original one brought forth, is the strangest of the three, the one the old books are most reluctant to name, the one whose story is told in the lowest voice, because where Dialga gave us time and Palkia gave us space, the third was given the place between, the shadow underneath the world, the anti-world where everything we know runs backward. We'll go there next, but softly, because this is the part of the myth where the old stories grow quiet, and so should we. There is a third being, and to understand it, we have to understand something the old myths grasped long before anyone could have explained it, that you cannot make a world of only light, that every act of creation casts a shadow, and the shadow is not a mistake, it is part of the design. The third being is called Giratina. Now, I want to be careful here because this is the place in the story where the telling can go wrong. There are versions of this myth told to frighten children, versions where Giratina is a monster, a thing lurking in the dark to be feared. That is not the version we're telling tonight, and it isn't, I think, the truest version either. Tonight we're telling the older, sadder, gentler story. The story of the one who was given the hardest task of all, and who carries it alone, far from the world it helped to make. Here is what the myths say. When the original one shaped reality, it did not only make time and space, it made as well their reflection, their opposite, a world that runs alongside our own, sharing its borders, touching it everywhere and visible nowhere, a place where the laws we take for granted simply do not hold, where up and down are suggestions, where the ground might be the ceiling, and a waterfall might pour sideways into the sky, and gravity itself forgets which way it is supposed to pull. The old books call it, in the modern translation, the Distortion world, and Giratina is its keeper. Picture, gently, a vast serpentine being, dark as a thundercloud with bands of gold and crimson, with great wings or great spectral limbs depending on which side of the boundary it stands. In our world, the myths say, Giratina takes one shape. In the Distortion world, where the rules are different, it takes another. It belongs to both and neither. It is the hinge between them. Why does such a place exist at all? Here the myth offers us something quietly profound. A universe needs its opposite. Time needs the possibility of time undone. Space needs the possibility of space unmade. Matter, the very stuff that things are made of, needs antimatter, its mirror, its counterweight, or it could not be stable at all. The Distortion world is the necessary shadow that lets the bright world hold its shape. Without it, the myth seems to say, our world would have nothing to lean against. It would wobble and fall and unmake itself. The shadow is what keeps the light standing, and so the third being was given the loneliest role in all of creation, to dwell in the reflection, to keep the anti-world stable so that the true world could thrive, to stand at the boundary, mostly unseen, holding the back of the mirror so that the rest of us can see ourselves in the front of it. But there is another telling, and this is where the old stories grow quiet. Some of the legends say that Giratina did not choose the Distortion world. Some say it was sent there, that in the early shaping of things, Giratina was too violent, too fierce, too much for the gentle young world to bear, and so it was banished, cast out of the bright reality and sealed away in the reverse world to watch over it from the other side. Sit with that for a moment, in the kindest way. Because if that telling is true, then this is not a story about a monster at all. It is a story about an exile, about a being that was part of the family of creation, born of the same original one, brother to time and space, and was sent to live forever on the far side of a door that almost never opens, holding up a world it can never walk in, keeping the lights on in a house it was told to leave. That is not a thing to be afraid of. That is a thing to be tender toward, and the myths, in their wiser moments, seem to feel the same way, because they do not paint Giratina as evil. They paint it as necessary and solitary and strange, the keeper of balance, the one who pays the price so the rest of creation doesn't have to. Every now and then, the old stories say, the boundary thins, at certain places, at certain times in the quiet hours, and the Distortion world presses close against our own. And in those moments, if you knew where to look, you might catch a glimpse of that other reality, hanging just behind the world like the silver backing behind a pane of glass. Now here's where it gets stranger, and then we'll let the section rest. The Distortion world, the myths say, is a place without time as we know it. Remember Dialga's river, the great current that carries every moment forward. In the anti-world, that river does not flow the same way. Some tellings say time barely moves there at all. Others say it moves in circles or in fragments or all at once, which means Giratina, alone in its reflected world, may not experience the long ages the way we do, may not feel the centuries passing the way time-bound creatures feel them. Whether that is a mercy or a deeper loneliness, the old books do not say. They only leave the image with us, the way they leave so many images, a vast being in a world of floating stone and sideways water, where the moments do not fall in a line, watching the bright world through the back of the mirror, keeping it steady, asking for nothing. So let's gather the three of them together now, because the frame of the world is finally complete, and it's a good place to pause and breathe. From the original one, alone in the nothing, came three: Dialga, the keeper of time, and the great river began to flow, carrying every moment forward, before and after, the past gathering behind and the future opening ahead. Palkia, the keeper of space, and the world unfolded with room enough for everything to be apart from everything else, here and there, distances soft and vast, and Giratina, the keeper of the place between, holding the necessary shadow, the anti-world, the mirror's silver back, so that the bright world could stand at all. 3 pillars, time and space and the balance underneath them both. The deep machinery of reality, all of it born from a single being that came before the world. And yet, and here is the thing, the world still has no one in it. No minds to know it, no hearts to feel it, no will to move through it and make it mean anything. The frame is built, the stage is set, but the stage is empty. That changes next, because the original one was not finished. Out of the world it had shaped, 3 more were about to be born, smaller than the great pillars, but in their own way just as important. The givers of mind and feeling and will. The reason any of this would ever matter to anyone at all. But we've come a long way, and the night is deep, and there's no need to rush onward. So let's just rest here for a moment, in the finished frame of the young world. Time flowing, space unfolded, the shadow held steady underneath, and out in all that new and waiting room, a silence about to be filled. So the frame of the world was built, but a frame is not a home, and the original one, if the myths can be trusted, was not content to leave the world a beautiful, empty machine, all gears and rivers and reflected light, with no one inside it to wake up and wonder at it. And so came 3 more, smaller than the great pillars, born not to hold up reality but to fill it with someone. The old books of Sinnoh call them, together, the beings of the lakes, and in the modern tongue their names are Uxie, Mespri, and Azelf. The story goes that they were born together, 3 from one, and that for a long age they travelled the young world side by side, and then, the myth says, they parted. Each went to rest at the bottom of a different lake in 3 far corners of the land, and there they have slept ever since, watching over the world from beneath the still water. 3 quiet lakes scattered across the region, and under each one a sleeping guardian, holding one of the 3 gifts that would change everything. Let's meet them one at a time, and of the 3, let's begin with the giver of knowledge. At the bottom of the northernmost, coldest lake rests Uxie. The myths call it the being of knowledge, and the gift it gave to the world was the gift of intelligence, of understanding, of the ability to learn one thing and then another, and to fit them together into wisdom. Think about what the world was before that gift. A world can have time and space and balance, and still be a world where nothing ever understands anything, where the rain falls and no one knows it is rain, where the stars wheel overhead and no one ever counts them, or names them, or wonders what they are. Uxie's gift was the lamp that lit the inside of the mind. The myth says that when Uxie touched the world, knowledge became possible, the slow, patient gathering of understanding that lets a creature look at the world and begin to comprehend it. And there is a strange and gentle warning folded into Uxie's legend. It is said that to look upon Uxie directly, to meet the being of knowledge face to face, is to lose your memories entirely, to have your mind wiped as clean as the day you were born. Whether that is a curse or a kind of mercy, the old stories leave open. Perhaps there is some knowledge too vast for a small mind to carry. Perhaps the guardian of all understanding cannot be understood, only glimpsed, and then forgotten, the way a dream of enormous meaning dissolves the moment you try to hold it. There's something almost comforting in that on a night like this. The idea that some things are too large to keep, and that forgetting them is no failure, only the mind's gentle way of letting go. Now, at the bottom of a second lake, the one the old stories most often place at the very heart of the region, rests Mespri, the being of emotion. And of the 3 gifts, this may be the one that matters most to us, because it is the one we feel most directly every single day, without ever thinking about where it came from. Mespri, the myths say, gave the world the ability to feel, not just to know the world, the way Uxie's gift allows, but to be moved by it, to see a sunset and feel something rise in the chest that has no name, to lose something and ache, to find something and be glad, to love. The whole vast inner weather of joy and sorrow and tenderness and longing, all of it, the legend says, is Mespris doing. Before Mespris, a creature might have known that the rain was falling. After Mespris, a creature could stand in the rain and feel small and safe and quietly alive. There is an old saying tucked into the Sinnoh myths that Mespris taught the world the nobility of sorrow and the joy of living. And isn't that a remarkable pairing to set side by side, that the same gift which lets us feel joy is the gift that lets us feel grief, that you cannot have the one without the other, that a heart capable of being lifted is by the very same design a heart capable of being broken. Mespris's gift is the whole of it. Both sides of the coin, the price and the prize given together, because they were never really two things at all. And then at the bottom of the third lake rests Azelf, the being of willpower, the giver of the strength to act. This is the quietest of the three gifts to describe, but it may be the one that turns the other two into something real. Because what good is knowledge if you never do anything with it? What good is feeling if it never moves you to act? You can understand the whole world and feel its full weight, and still lie frozen, unable to take a single step. Azelf's gift was the spark that bridges the gap, the will, the determination, the resolve, the thing that lets a creature decide and then move, the push behind every choice that was ever made. The old stories say that without Azelf, the world would have stood still, full of minds that understood and hearts that felt, but bodies that never stirred, dreams that were never reached for. Azelf gave the world its forward motion, not the river of time, but something gentler and more personal, the will of each living thing to lean into its own life and go. Knowledge, emotion, willpower, three gifts from three guardians, sleeping under three quiet lakes. And here is the part of the myth that I find most beautiful, and it's worth slowing down for. These three were born together from a single being before they parted to their separate lakes, which means the legend is telling us something quietly underneath the surface of the story, that to know, to feel, and to will are not really three different things. They are three faces of one thing, one whole inner life, split into parts so the story can show us each in turn, but meant always to be lived together. A mind that knows but cannot feel is cold. A heart that feels but cannot act is trapped. A will that drives forward with no knowledge and no feeling is blind. It is only the three woven together, understanding and emotion and resolve, that make a complete inner life, that make, in other words, a someone rather than a something. That is the gift the late guardians gave the world. Not just minds, not just the machinery of thought. They gave the world the capacity to have an inside, to be a person in the deepest sense, to know and to feel and to choose. And there's a soft, strange thread the old stories sometimes pull on, and we'll touch it lightly before we move on. It is whispered that the three guardians are linked to the very existence of these things in the world, that knowledge and emotion and willpower persist because the guardians persist, sleeping safely beneath their lakes, and that if the guardians were ever lost, the world might lose those gifts along with them. Minds going dim, hearts going quiet, the will to go on simply fading. It is a frightening thought told plainly, but the old stories do not tell it to frighten. They tell it to make us grateful, to remind us that the things we take most for granted, that we can think, that we can feel, that we can choose, are not guaranteed. They were given, they are held even now by three guardians sleeping in the dark water, asking nothing, keeping the lamps of every mind quietly lit. So let's take our breath here and gather the story again, because it has grown large and lovely. The frame of the world was built, time and space and the balance beneath them, and then the world was given an inside. Knowledge from Uxie sleeping in the cold northern lake, emotion from Mespris at the heart of the land, willpower from Azelf in the third still water. 3 gifts that turned an empty, beautiful machine into a place where someone could wake up and know they were alive, and feel glad of it, and choose what to do with the day. But the world still needed one more thing. It had its frame, and it had the seeds of mind and heart. What it did not yet have was form, order, a land shaped and settled, continents set in their places, and living creatures given bodies to carry all these gifts inside. The world had been given a soul. Now it needed a face. That comes next. And with it, the old story turns at last from the cosmic to the close, from the void and the pillars and the sleeping guardians, down to the solid ground and the first living things to walk upon it. So far, everything we've spoken of has been vast and abstract. Time, space, the anti-world, the gifts of mind and feeling and will. These are the deep foundations, but you cannot stand on a foundation alone. At some point, the world needs ground. It needs mountains and seas, valleys and shores, a solid-shaped land for living things to walk across. And it needs, of course, the living things themselves. This is where the old story comes down from the heavens and touches the earth. The myths of Sinnoh tell of a being of enormous patient strength, a being said to have shaped the very land itself. Its name is Regigigas, and the legend that surrounds it is one of the most vivid in all the old books, because it is so wonderfully physical after all the cosmic abstraction that came before. It is said that in ancient times, when the continents were not yet where they are now, Regigigas moved them, that this colossal being took hold of the great land masses and towed them across the face of the young world, dragging them into their places one by one, the way you might pull furniture across a floor, except the furniture was entire continents and the floor was the surface of the world. Picture that gently as you drift. A being so strong it could pull a continent, leaning into the work age after age with no hurry, the way a glacier has no hurry, shifting the shape of the world by slow degrees until the land settled into the arrangement we know, the seas finding their basins, the coastlines finding their curves, the great spread of the world taking on, at last, a recognizable face. And then, its work done, the legend says Regigigas went still, came to rest, and has slept ever since, somewhere deep and cold, the way so many of these old guardians sleep, its great labor finished, the land it shaped settling around it into permanence. And the same myths say that Regigigas made others in its own image, beings of stone, of ice, of steel, shaped to endure, set across the land as a kind of quiet legacy, whether they were helpers or guardians, or simply the first attempt at giving the bare earth some inhabitants. The stories don't entirely agree, but the image is a lovely one, the shaper of the land having moved the continents into place, then reaching down into the stone and the frost and the metal of the world it had arranged, and bringing forth the first solid, enduring forms to stand upon it. So now the world has its shape. The continents are set, the seas are in their basins, the land has a face, but it is still, in a sense, waiting, because the deepest question of the whole creation myth has not yet been answered. Where did the living things come from? Not the great guardians. They came first, born of the original one or shaped in the early ages, but the others, the countless ordinary creatures, the ones that fill the forests and the seas and the skies, the ones that are born and live and pass on and are born again, generation after generation. Where did all of life begin? And here the myths grow careful and a little quiet, because this is one of the places where the old stories do not fully agree, and where what people believe and what the books actually confirm begin to drift apart. There is a legend of a single ancestor, a first living creature, from which all others are said to descend. The old stories speak of a small, gentle being, said to carry within itself the seeds of every Pokémon that would ever live, every shape and every kind, all folded together in one modest form. The legends call it the ancestor of all. In the modern tongue, its name is Mew. Now this is the part the old stories disagree on, and it's worth sitting with rather than rushing past, because it's one of the great unresolved questions at the very root of the whole myth. If the original one shaped the universe, and if Mew is the ancestor of all living things, Then which came first? Did the original one create Mew, and Mew then give rise to all the rest? Or is Mew something older, something the great creation myth doesn't fully account for? A separate thread of the story that the old books never quite tie together? The legends do not say. They genuinely do not say. The myth of the original one and the myth of the first living ancestor sit side by side in the old libraries, and no one has ever fully reconciled them. And you know what? That's all right. In fact, it might be the most fitting thing in the whole story, because a creation myth that explained everything, that left no loose threads, that answered every question down to the last detail, that wouldn't feel like a creation myth at all. It would feel like an instruction manual. The old stories of every people in every age have always kept a few mysteries at their center, unsolved, glowing softly in the dark. This is one of those. Where did life truly begin? The myth offers us an ancestor and a creator, and then, gently, deliberately, declines to tell us how they fit together. And it hands the question to us, to carry as lightly or as deeply as we like. So let's gather it all together, because the work of creation is, in a sense, now complete. And it's a good high place to rest and look back over how far we've come. In the beginning there was nothing, and in the nothing, the original one, alone, emerging from an egg the story cannot explain. And from the original one came the three great pillars, time in Dialga, and the river began to flow, space in Palkia, and the world unfolded with room to hold everything apart, and the balance beneath them both in Giratina, keeping the necessary shadow on the far side of the mirror. And then the world was given an inside. Knowledge from Uxie, emotion from Mespri, will from Azelf. Three guardians sleeping under three still lakes, holding the gifts that turn a something into a someone. And then the world was given form. The land shaped and the continents drawn into place by the patient strength of Regigigas, and the first enduring beings set upon the stone. And then, at last, life itself, flowing, the old stories say, from a single gentle ancestor, the seed of every creature that would ever be. Time, space, balance, mind, heart, will, form, and life. The whole world, assembled piece by piece, out of the nothing by the overflowing of a single being that came before it all. That is the heart of the creation myth. That is the story the libraries of Sinnoh have kept for longer than anyone can remember. But the story doesn't quite end there, because the people who tell this myth have always understood something, that a creation this vast would not stay neatly inside one region's legends. The echoes of it ripple outward. In far-off lands, other peoples tell their own myths, of other great beings, other origins, other guardians of life and death and sky and sea. And though the old books of Sinnoh do not claim to explain those distant legends, the resonances are hard to ignore. The same deep patterns surfacing again and again in story after story, across the whole wide world. So before we let the night carry us all the way down into sleep, let's drift outward gently and listen to a few of those distant echoes. Not all of them. There are far too many, and a myth told as a checklist is no myth at all. Just a few, chosen not because they complete the picture, but because they rhyme with it. Before we drift outward to the distant lands, there's one more piece of the Sinnoh story worth holding up to the light, because we've spoken of how the world was given its frame, and its inside, and its form, but there's a subtler kind of order woven through everything, one so deep that we usually forget it's there at all. The order of the elements themselves. Think for a moment about how the world is built. There is fire, and there is water. There is the green and growing things, and the stone they grow upon. There is the lightning in the storm, the chill in the deep winter, the wind that moves the grass, the strange and quiet forces that the old stories barely have names for. The world is not one undifferentiated stuff. It comes in kinds, in natures, in a great wheel of elements, each with its own character, each balanced against the others, fire yielding to water, water drawn up by the green things broken by the stone, and on around the whole turning wheel. Where did that order come from? The old myths of Sinnoh offer a quiet answer. They speak of ancient tablets, plates, the legends call them, scattered across the world since the earliest days. Each one is said to hold the essence of a single element, one for the flame, one for the deep water, one for the storm, one for the frost, one for the meadow, one for the mountain's heart, one for the open sky. A set of ancient stones, each carrying within it one of the fundamental natures of the world, and the legends say these plates are connected somehow to the original one itself. That Arceus, the being that shaped the world, is bound up with all of the elements at once, that it can take on the nature of any of them, becoming a creature of fire or of water or of storm, as easily as you or I might change which way we are facing, as though the original one is not any one element, but the source of all of them. The single white light from which all the colours of the world were split. And isn't that a fitting final touch to the work of creation? We've watched the original one divide the seamless nothing into time and space. We've watched it set a balance between the bright world and its shadow. We've watched the single inner life split into knowing and feeling and willing. And here once more, the same pattern in the smallest grain of the world, the one becoming many, a single source of all natures dividing itself into fire and water and stone and sky, so that the world would not be one flat sameness, but a rich and varied weave of elements, forever balanced, forever turning against one another in the great slow wheel. That, the old stories suggest, is the last and finest layer of order laid over the young world, not just time and space and form and life, but the deep grammar of the elements themselves, the reason the world has fire and water and frost and storm at all, the reason it has variety, the reason it has, in a word, character. So let's add it to our gathering before we travel on. The world was given time and space and the balance beneath them. It was given mind and heart and will. It was given form and life. And it was given, woven through all of it, the order of the elements, the great turning wheel of natures that makes the world not a blank but a tapestry. And now, with the whole of creation assembled, the frame, the inside, the form, the life, and the elemental order running through it all, we can let our attention drift at last beyond the borders of Sinnoh, out toward the distant lands where other peoples told other stories, to listen for the echoes. Before we begin, one honest word, spoken softly because it matters. The old books of Sinnoh do not claim to explain the legends of other regions. The myths we're about to drift through belong to their own peoples, their own lands, their own libraries. No ancient text ties them all neatly together into one grand story. So when you hear the echoes, and you will hear them, understand that the echoes are something we notice, not something the myths declare. They are a rhyme, not a record. But oh, what rhymes they are. Let's listen to three. First, let's travel to a land of bells and towers, where two great beings rule the sky and the sea. In the old stories of that region, there is a guardian of the heavens, a great bird wreathed in rainbow light, said to trail 7 colours across the sky as it flies. Its name is Hulhul, and of all the legends in all the regions, Hulhul's may be the one most concerned with the thing the Sinnoh myth only touched on lightly: second chances, renewal, the mercy of beginning again. The most beautiful of Ho-Oh's legends tells of a tower that burned. Long ago, the story goes, a great tower stood, and one night it was consumed by fire, and in the blaze 3 creatures perished. And Ho-Oh, the guardian of the sky, looked down upon the ruin and brought the 3 back, restored them, gave them their lives again, transformed, reborn from the ashes of the place that had killed them. And ever since, the old stories say, Ho-Oh has been a being of resurrection, appearing only to those whose hearts are pure, leaving a trail of 7 colours behind it, a promise written across the sky that what is lost is not always lost forever. Do you hear the echo? In Sinnoh, the world is made once by the overflowing of a single being, but here, in the legend of Ho-Oh, creation is not a thing that happened only at the beginning. It is a thing that can happen again. The fire takes and the rainbow gives back. Endings turn out to be beginnings wearing a different face. There is something in that legend made for the quiet hours, the gentle, stubborn idea that the world is built not only to begin, but to begin again, and Ho-Oh does not rule alone. For where the rainbow guardian holds the sky, another being holds the sea. Deep beneath the waves, in the dark and the pressure and the cold, dwells Lugia, guardian of the ocean, keeper of the deep places, a being so powerful that the old stories say the beating of its wings could call up storms, and so the wise among them learned to let it rest. Lugia is the counterweight to Ho-Oh, one of the open sky and the rising flame, one of the deep water and the patient dark, the bright above and the still below. Two guardians, one for the heights and one for the depths, holding the world between them the way two hands hold a bowl, sky and sea, fire and water. You'll notice as we go how often the old myths come in pairs like this. Two great forces, opposite and balanced, each meaningless without the other. We saw it already, didn't we, in the very heart of the Sinnoh story, in time and space, in the bright world and its shadow. The pattern keeps returning, as if creation itself has a grammar, and the grammar is built out of pairs, which brings us, fittingly, to our second echo. And it is the one that rhymes most deeply of all, because it is at its heart a story about a single thing becoming two. Far to a distant region, the old legends tell of a dragon, not two dragons, one, a single original dragon, ancient beyond reckoning, that in the earliest days was whole and undivided, one being containing within itself everything a dragon could be, and then, the story goes, it was split. The legend tells of two brothers, heroes of old, who sought together to understand the world. But as the years passed, the two came to want different things. One brother believed above all in truth, in what is, in the world as it actually is, seen clearly and without illusion. The other believed above all in ideals, in what could be, in the world as it ought to become, reached for with all one's heart. Truth and ideals, and the two could not be reconciled. Each was certain, each was, in his own way, right. And in their disagreement, the great original dragon, unable to serve two masters who wanted opposite things, split in two. From the half that answered the first brother came a white dragon of truth, wreathed in fire, its tail burning like a furnace. Its name is Reshiram. From the half that answered the second came a black dragon of ideals, crackling with lightning, its tail glowing like an engine of storms. Its name is Zekrom. Truth in white flame, ideals in black thunder. Two beings born from one, each carrying half of what the original dragon had been. Now sit with that, because the rhyme with Sinnoh is almost unbearable in how exact it is. In the very beginning of our story, what did the original one do? It took the seamless nothing and divided it. It made time and made space, and the two of them are opposites that cannot be collapsed into one, before and after, here and there. And here, in this distant legend, the same deep pattern returns in a different key, a single whole divided into two opposing truths, because the world apparently cannot hold certain things together in one body. Some unities, it seems, can only exist as pairs. Some wholeness can only live by being split. And there is a third piece to this legend, and it is the quietest and the saddest, and it belongs to a night like this. Because when the original dragon split into truth and ideals, into Reshiram and Zekrom, something was left behind. An empty shell, the husk of the original dragon, drained of the truth and the ideals that had given it life, left cold and hollow and incomplete. The legends call it Curem, and they say it waits in a place of ice and silence, longing, always longing, to be whole again, to be rejoined with the halves that were torn from it, to stop being an absence and become, once more, a presence. There is something in that image that stays with you, the price of division, that when the one became two, what was left over was not nothing, it was a third thing, a lack, a being made entirely of the space where something used to be. The old stories do not tell us whether Curem will ever be made whole. They only leave it there in the cold waiting, and perhaps that waiting is part of the world's design too, the same way Giratina's exile is part of the design, the lonely remainder that the bright halves leave behind, the shadow cost of every act of creation. Let's breathe here for a moment, because we've gone deep, and the night is deep with us. So far, we've drifted from the Sinnoh creation outward to two distant echoes, the guardians of sky and sea with their rainbow promise of renewal, and the original dragon split into truth and ideals, with its hollow remainder waiting in the ice. Two regions, two legends, and underneath them both, the same Sinnoh grammar, creation as division, the world built out of balanced opposites, and always, somewhere, a lonely third thing keeping the balance from the edges. Let's drift to one last echo, and we'll choose this one because it speaks to the two oldest forces of all, the two that every living thing knows in its bones, whether it has words for them or not: life and death. In a far western land, the old legends tell of a being that is life itself, a great and shining creature, its horns spreading like the branches of a tree, said to share the gift of eternal life with the world around it. Its name is Xerneas. The legend says that when its long work is done, Xerneas does not simply die, it withdraws. It folds itself into the form of a great tree and sleeps, for 1,000 years, the story says, and in that long sleep it is not gone, only resting, only waiting, the way a forest waits beneath the snow for a spring that is certain to come, life that gives, and then rests, and then gives again. Life that cannot be used up, only renewed. And where there is life, the old pattern tells us there must be its opposite. And so the same land tells of a second being, the dark twin of the first, a great winged creature of destruction said to absorb the life force of all living things when its own life ends, drinking in the vitality of the world around it before it too withdraws to sleep, sealed in a cocoon, waiting through the long ages for the time of its waking. Its name is Yveltal, and it is not, the wiser tellings insist, an evil. It is the necessary other half. For a world of only life with nothing ever ending, nothing ever clearing away to make room for the new, such a world would choke on its own endlessness. Death is what lets life keep beginning. The dark twin is what gives the bright twin its meaning. And in some tellings there is a third, a quieter being, neither life nor death, but the keeper of the balance between them, a guardian of order, watching from hidden places, stirring only when the equilibrium of the world is threatened, working to set life and death back into their proper measure. Its name is Zigard, and there it is again. Do you hear it? The third one, the keeper of balance, standing apart from the two great opposites, holding them in their proper relation. We have met this figure before, haven't we, again and again, all night long. In Sinnoh, it was Giratina, keeping the shadow world that lets the bright world stand. In the land of the dragon, it was Curem, the hollow remainder of the split. And here, in the west, it is Zigard, the guardian of order between life and death. Different names, different lands, different legends, told by different peoples who may never have heard one another's stories. And underneath them all, the same deep shape, two great opposing forces, and a third that holds the balance. That is the rhyme. That is what the echoes are echoing. And now, gently, let's begin to come home. Out of the distant lands and back toward the place we started, back toward the void before time, and the single being alone within it, because there is one last thing to say, and it is the thing the whole story has been quietly circling all along. Not what the myths confirm, but what they refuse to. We've come a long way tonight, from the nothing before the world, all the way out to the distant legends of far-off lands, and now slowly back again. So let's gather the whole story one final time, slowly, with no hurry, and then let's sit together in the questions the old books leave open. Because a creation myth, in the end, is measured not only by what it explains, but by what it has the wisdom to leave unexplained. Here is the story, whole, the way the old libraries keep it. In the beginning there was nothing, and in the nothing, though there was no somewhere for it to be, there was already something. A single being, alone, that the legends call the original one. It emerged, the oldest telling says, from a single egg adrift in the formless chaos, and where that egg came from, no story will ever say. And the original one, alone in all that emptiness, began to create, not out of need, out of overflowing. And the first things it made were not stars or seas, but the deep foundations underneath all things. Time, in the keeper called Dialga, and the great river of moments began to flow, before and after, past and future, the current that carries all of us even now. And space, in the keeper called Palkia, and the world unfolded with room at last. Here and there, near and far, the soft vast distances that let one thing be apart from another, and beneath them both, the shadow that lets the light stand, the anti-world, and its lonely keeper Giratina, holding the back of the mirror so the rest of us can see ourselves in the front of it. And then the world was given an inside. 3 guardians born together and parted to 3 still lakes. Uxie, who gave the gift of knowledge, the lamp lit inside the mind. Mespri, who gave the gift of emotion, the whole inner weather of joy and sorrow given together because they were never really 2 things. And Azelf, who gave the gift of will, the spark that turns understanding and feeling into action, the quiet push behind every choice that has ever been made. And then the world was given form. The land itself shaped, the continents drawn slowly into their places by the patient, enormous strength of Regigigas, until the world had a face we would recognize. And then, at the last, life, flowing, the old stories say, from a single gentle ancestor, the seed of every living thing that would ever be. And outward from all of that, the echoes, the guardians of sky and sea and their rainbow promise of renewal. The original dragon split into truth and ideals, with its hollow remainder waiting in the ice. The great twins of life and death, and the quiet third that keeps them in balance. The same deep grammar surfacing again and again in land after land. Creation as division, the world built out of balanced pairs, and always, somewhere at the edge, a lonely third thing holding it all steady. That is the story. That is what the myths confirm, or tell as legend, or whisper as something close to legend. Now here is what they refuse to say, and this, I think, is the real heart of it. The part worth carrying with you down into sleep. The myths never say where the egg came from. We've touched this already, but it deserves to be the last word, because it is the deepest question there is, and the old books are brave enough to leave it open. They take us back, and back, and back, to the pillars, to the original one, to the egg in the void, and then they stop. Not because the storytellers were lazy, because they understood that the question has no flaw. You can always ask what came before, and the wisest thing a myth can do, in the face of a question with no flaw, is to fall silent at the right moment and let the silence be an answer of its own. The myths never say which came first, the creator or the first living thing, the original one that shaped the universe, and the gentle ancestor from which all life descends, sit side by side in the old libraries, and no story has ever tied them together. It is a genuine loose thread, left genuinely loose, and maybe that's right. Maybe a creation story that explained even the origin of life down to the last detail would have explained away the very mystery that makes us look up at the world and wonder in the first place. The myths never fully say why Giratina dwells apart, whether it was banished, or whether it chose the lonely work of holding up the shadow world, or whether, and this is the gentlest reading of all, those 2 things were always the same thing, and every necessary role looks like an exile from the inside. The old books decline to settle it. They leave the great being there, in its reflected world of floating stone and sideways water, and they let us decide for ourselves whether to pity it, or honor it, or simply be grateful to it. And the myths never quite say whether the great forces are at peace, whether time and space are partners or rivals, whether the original dragon's 2 halves will ever rejoin the hollow third, whether life and death are at war, or simply taking turns. The old stories hold all of these in a kind of suspension, not resolved, not denied, the way the world itself holds them. Because the truth the myths seem to know, underneath everything, is that the world is not a finished thing with all its questions answered. It is an ongoing thing, a balance still being kept, a story still being told, and we are living inside the telling of it. right now, tonight. So let that be the thought you carry down with you. You are lying somewhere in all that vastness that Palkia unfolded, your own particular spot in all the room there is, separated by gentle distances from everyone and everything else, a place that is yours alone. You are being carried even now along the river that Dialga set flowing, moment after moment, second after second, gently forward, toward a morning you don't have to think about yet. You are holding right now the 3 gifts the Lake Guardians gave the world. You know things and you feel things and you have the will to choose. And tonight you get to set all 3 of them down for a while and simply rest. The knowing can stop. The feeling can soften. The willing can let go. None of it is going anywhere. The Guardians will keep it all safe beneath the still water until morning. And far away on the other side of the mirror, the lonely keeper holds the shadow steady so that your bright world stays whole while you sleep. And further out, the dragons sleep too. The one of fire and the one of lightning and the hollow one in the ice. And the tree that is really a being of life sleeps its 1,000-year sleep, waiting for a spring that is certain to come. And somewhere beyond all of them, before all of them, the original one keeps its long and patient vigil over everything it made, asking nothing, the way it has since before there was a sky, the whole vast machinery of creation turning quietly in the dark. Time still flowing, space still holding, the balance still kept, and you, one small, warm, living thing inside all of it, allowed for tonight to do nothing at all but breathe, and drift, and let the great old story carry you the rest of the way down. There is nothing left for you to do now. The world is made. It was made long before you, and it will hold itself together just fine while you rest. So let your breathing slow. Let the edges of the room go soft. Let the names drift apart from their meanings. Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, the lakes, the dragons, the tree, until they're just gentle sounds, just smooth stones at the bottom of a quiet lake, with the still water closing over them. The myth has been told. The questions can wait. The morning will come on its own, carried to you on the river that never stops flowing. For now, there is only this: the world turning gently in the dark, and you, safe inside it. Rest now, sleep well, and we'll tell another old story the next time the night comes round.